Hello to all. I'm here today in the Tier 10 British Tech Tree aircraft carrier Audacious. Here on the map hotspot, the mode is Domination. We're in top tier in mixed 8 to 10 matchmaking, so hopefully things should go fairly smoothly. Now, Audacious is not the most powerful of carriers, which is why I haven't commentated on it in a fair bit, although it is quite fun, I would say. So it is a fun, but not quite as egregiously overpowered Tier 10 carrier. Quite a bit less carry power thanks to its mix-up armaments and the overall reliability. Anyhow, we're against a Manfred, Repub GK Iowa Jean Bar Kansas Monarch in terms of battleship lineups, so quite a few battleships, but not any real threats to us. And then Moskva Hepper for the cruisers, Somers, Shimakaze, and a Lone Holland. Now the Holland can be thorny, but with a full strength Audacious squadron with 22,000 health, you should still be able to strike the Holland if necessary. If he happens to open up a few on your AA under most circumstances. Moskva, Jean Bar, and Repub are the first to light up. Just gonna mirror my Holland, see what I can find. And there is indeed that Holland. Now remember I mentioned that full strength squadron. So we hold down on the brakes and we'll see what kind of punishment we can deliver. Not interested in sticking around. You can see still a pretty hefty 6,000 damage strike and a good decent amount of scouting information. He's gonna maul my squadron in return, however, though. So note how even my substantial... Oh, the MVR is going for a carrier snipe. So I can't actually angle against him appropriately at the moment. Even with the legendary module, I can sector, but he's gonna slam me for a substantial amount of damage here. Because of the position of the island, I can't really angle properly against the rockets, so he's going to get a pretty hefty strike here. You can see an annoying 12,000 damage. So since this guy's starting on a carrier snipe, if you start a carrier snipe, you should really finish it as much as possible. So there's more than likely going to be more planes headed my way, so I'm going to head for open water where I can maintain some level of spotting. In the meantime, though, I need to race to try and kill his teammates to try and force an avenue forward, maybe threaten his hull, or just threaten to have our team cap out. Dropping a fighter here, if I need to defend myself. Looks like he's going after the Shimakaze now, which is an odd choice. Kansas dropping a fighter. Now my Audacious level bombers do have 41 millimeters of kind of uniform penetration for the most part. And when they perform, as you can see, they can perform quite well, getting a triple fire there. Sadly, he does have his DCP up, and I don't have the endurance on this squadron to actually capitalize on that triple fire. It would be ill-advised to go back in, so I'm just going to recall, even though it is quite tempting. I am going to lose a destroyer, sadly. Do note that we do not see any further aircraft from the Graf Zeppelin, or MVR, sorry, at the moment, so this is going to be a troublesome position. The Moskva chasing my Holland out. The storm, by the way, is kind of distorting the camera. Something very annoying that does. Still using his rockets, which is interesting. There's a Moskva kind of sailing broadside in the middle of nowhere. I don't really know what's up with that. I expect him to turn out, but if he stays committed, I will definitely go after him. Now his A is quite long ranged, but unlike the Petropavlovsk or even the Alexander Nevsky or Stalingrad, the Moskva's AA lacks the bite of its brothers. Nice triple slam. Should hopefully be enough to help my allies clean him up. Alright, he's healing, so shouldn't have been greedy. Do clip some flaks on the way out, which will result in me losing basically some extra aircraft. but it is what it is. The Holland Torp finally clips that guy on the way out. Not sure if I would have hit him. He did do a hard turn. And I'm going to continue to move my carrier down along the spine, following my battleships. Not necessarily what you want to do, but I'm a bit out of position now. It can't really defend my battleships over there from that MBR, for example. I'm going to go after this lone GK who's attempting to murder my Mogami, from the looks of it. Don't anticipate getting a good angle here, so rather than fighting him, I'm just going to ditch the drop and come around for a follow-up strike. GK does dispatch my Mogami quite easily, and you can see, against a much more heavily armored GK, getting a bunch of shatters. I only have 41mm of penetration. It's going to pop a fighter, so that kind of dunks any opportunities I have of follow-up fires. So I'm just going to let that go. Oh, I do actually manage to time it out so that we do get a permanent fire. But we are in a precarious position for sure. There's an enemy, what's that, a submerged in there? And I have two of my battleships who are maybe not the brightest of players, not being particularly useful on the side. So the reason I'm pushing my hull in is because, well, I want to get close. You can see my 12-2 detection, which is actually fairly short for a modern post-captain rework carrier. This is, of course, because I am running the legendary module. You can see that unaimed strike has quite a wide margin, as I do manage to land a 3, but at the cost of several of my bombers. Georgia is nevertheless going to take him out, and we're going to proceed forward. Do want to capture the cap advantage since I don't have high confidence in the ability of my allies to maintain a ship lead. Going to maintain spotting on the Summers. Maintain more than a ship's length lead on this destroyer. Level bombers are not very effective against destroyers. And I have a beached Georgia there, so yep, my Montana going down. Kind of perhaps a sign of things to come. Just gonna abandon the attacks with the level bombers now and use a more suitable armament. Do manage to land 3 bombs on that guy in the end, but it's gonna take a little more than that. Okay, he does tick out. But there is still a hipper down there. I am gonna dispatch that hipper just to encourage my teammates to progress through the game and leave the border. My Georgia suffering from a case of perhaps poor driving. If that Holland on my team, who actually seems to be relatively intelligent, at least as far as random battles players go, can contain those battleships in the ACAP, we're going to have a much easier time. Okay, my nearly full health Georgia dies to the hipper somehow, so I assume the Summers must have launched torpedoes at him while he was in his vulnerable beached state, which just now landed home. Again, attacking through some defense fighters, which is unfortunate, but you have to do what you have to do. We do manage to trade. Okay, at this point, because we have secured a fair number of ships, I am going to attack the Repub, because my hull's in a relatively vulnerable position as I cap this point. So we are going to take these torpedo bombers and try for a flood. He's probably going to nose in toward the cap, so we can make the same kind of attack as we would on a FDR, kind of swinging the bombers into action after getting aim. Like so. Which is a unique trait to, well, formerly just the Audacious, but now the FDR as well. Just barely managed to clip him. You can can see, fully aimed, they do converge a fair bit more. And having ditched our payload, getting another 3 strikes and a flooding, let's see if we can get a perma fire as well. Now the Audacious bombers, not the greatest, but at 41mm of penetration, they are more than sufficient to handle the 32mm armored repub, and he's a fairly large target too. Not leading as much because this time he's flooding, so he's fairly slow, and you can see me getting 9 raw penetrations this time, compared to some of the other targets I was attacking earlier. Monarch as well, similarly thin-skinned. The Hipper is spotting my hull, or he's about to be anyway, but not too worried. I have allies there. Monarch launches a fighter, but I'm not going to be following up with a strike. I only have 6 aircraft here, so just going to ditch that. He's attacking me, but I'm nearly full health still. Triple fire again. Okay, this is some pretty good RNG, I would say, by the way. Oh, Hipper launches a fighter. So we are just going to pre-drop 1 set of these torpedo bombers. You can see the refresh time is fairly short. And he is too worried about other stuff, and my Conqueror manages to death strike him apparently. Although it was a detonation, it was an HE salvo. But as I was saying, you can see these bombers do nearly, well, just about 200 knots. This is of course with the legendary captain Andrew Cunningham mounted on with the lightning fast talent activated. But with the captain skill, increasing bomber speed, and lightning fast together, you can get the bombers of the Audacious, which are relatively pedestrian in speed, up to a fairly competitive 200 knots, which is nice. Something that the other carriers, such as even legendary module Midway, cannot necessarily do. This guy's reversing, so again, you can see the huge size of my reticle, which does not help with the aiming issues. And we score another 5 pens and a fire. Now, we drop 18 bombs per pass, so landing just 5 or 6 bombs per pass is typical, however. Now the Manfred's covered in 50mm armored deck. Okay, he's healing, and he DCP'd, so I was gonna demonstrate that the Manfred deck completely defeats our armor, but I'm gonna just go for another pass, make sure that guy goes down. Recalling here because no point going after the Manfred with just 2 bombers. Pretty easy game for us, I would say. A little shaky in the middle, but overall my teammates, especially the Holland in the center, doing a fairly good job in holding down the fort. But even in a relatively ideal game here where I raked 3 triple fires, you can see the Audacious is not the most powerful. Okay, I'm gonna definitely flub that, but he was gonna die anyway. Let's see if we can make use of our short rearming time to get this strike off on this Manfred. Once you hear those bullets clatter onto the screen from the enemy fighters engaging, that's it's time to go. Okay, looks like these are some shimmy 20s. Don't really want to take those. So with the bomber upgrade and Andrew Cunningham activated, the bombers are actually faster, I believe, than the rockets, more or less. The only squadron really able to reach 200 knots on the Audacious. This guy's gone pretty far north, or he was behind the island. Just gonna run at him roughly. Sweeping the northern sector just to make sure he didn't go north. Okay, I'm dark again, and now I'm spotted. So he's actually on the underside, underbelly here in this circled area on the minimap. So we'll do a rough loop. See if we can find him. So he's gonna slip away, sadly, but this is the nature of things. $180,000 damage, but as I said, pretty easy matchmaking. So 15 torpedo hits, 52 bomb hits, 14 rocket hits, pretty atypical. Normally you'll see more rocket hits, but I didn't go after the DDs too much. Just that one demonstratory strike on the hull to show like that if you have the full strength squadron, you can still attack him once if necessary. 5 planes shot down, 5 incapacitations, 1 kill, 12 fires, 4 floods, and an assisted capture. I will say this is definitely a relatively better Audacious game, and even with that performance not coming anywhere near the top, these guys in the center are doing a pretty good job in holding down the center, so honestly, as far as random battles go, I'm fairly happy with their performance. You can see the vast majority of my damage coming from battleships, which is one of the key targets for the Audacious. Unfortunately, unlike the Midway or, say, the Coder MBR, the Midway's bombers, which are its primary anti-battleship armament, only have that 41mm of penetration, which is basically its key weakness, which keeps it from kind of being able to perform in the same way. It does drop a large number of bombs, but the reticle is enormous, as you saw there, and the penetration is sadly somewhat lacking. Now module-wise, pretty standard first 2 upgrade slots, aircraft engines and aircraft modification, and then I'm taking torpedo speed just to get that extra knot of speed or so on my torpedoes. Gives you 2 knots of speed. The other option is, of course, torpedo bomber aiming time, which can help if you like to do some of those trick shots, like the aim alongside and then turn in that you saw me do at one of the points there, similar to on the FDR. Slot 4, I put HP onto my bombers, since the bombers spend the most time over the target and they lack access to a heal, unlike the torpedo bombers. Slot 5, go for flight control. Audacious has some not great overall regeneration times, and its hangar capacity is not overly large, so the extra 2 slots definitely helps. The alternative is, of course, concealment systems, which is actually relatively more attractive after the captain rework, since you cannot take it on your captain, but in pretty much every case I can think of except the premium tier 8 Kaga, you do end up taking extra planes anyway. And in slot 6, I'm taking the legendary module, which is kind of interesting. It decreases your detectability by 15% for air and sea, and increases your squadron engine boost duration by 20%. And it also makes your hull a little more responsive, so it allows you to operate fairly forward. Before, if you combine this with concealment systems in slot 5 as well as concealment expert, you could get sub 10 kilometer detection, which was interesting to say the least, but these days it's pretty decent just to act as concealment expert without sacrificing extra planes. Before you get the legendary module, however, I opt for squadron speed to kind of push up the Audacious's relatively pedestrian squadron speed numbers. Now I'm running Andrew Cunningham, but pretty much the only thing he really gives you is the improved aircraft armor. Standard carrier build should go aircraft supremacy, or air supremacy, into plane speed, into armor and HP, and then from there you can do whatever. In the rework captain system, I do take bomber speed. It does really help the Audacious's level bombers kind of get to the target on time. And it's actually a fairly important squadron to the Audacious's overall performance. After that, I opt for demolition expert. So that would put you to 13 points, and then 17 points. Oh, actually, it should be 16. Can't do my mathematics. 9 plus 4 is 12, so 12 and then 15. At the moment, I'm currently taking decreased torpedo arming distance to get a nice tight reticle and last gasp. However, with my newfound understanding of how the proximity fuse skill works, you do actually use your Audacious torpedoes a fair bit, so I can see going for a very standard build with both bomber flight control and proximity fuse, similar to the way I have my midway spec, I believe. So this is my midway spec. There's 18 points expended. So the standard 9, and then I went for both 4-pointers and last gasp, and I'm saving up my next 2 points to go back for demolition expert. So this is a very standard way you could build your carrier as well. If you don't want the torpedo, if you want something similar to what I have right now on my Audacious, but you don't want the arming distance, you could just go for the 2 1-pointers for extended boost duration and a reduced boost cooldown, or you could go for an extra heal charge. All of these are fairly valid. The extra heal charge in particular is very useful to have in longer games to make sure you can preserve the HP on your torpedo bombers, which, while not particularly potent, each torpedo only hits for about 6,000 damage and you only drop 3 of them. They do make up a crucial part of your kit, and if you're running Cunningham, well, you need to use them to score that flood for the extra speed anyway, so a fairly good skill to take if available. Anyhow, not too much to say. The Audacious, not the most powerful carrier there. You saw like a key easy situation for the carrier to succeed in there, to be honest. So definitely has its moments, and still pretty fun, but definitely not the most powerful carrier. Now I am going to throw it back in, I think, at this point, hopefully. If this queue pops fairly quickly, we'll run it back for another game, but otherwise, time is kind of getting onto a time crunch somewhat, so we will see. I'll give it a good 30 seconds. Okay, so we did get into another match. We're against an FDR this time, so again, can be quite challenging. FDR is basically the carrier that Audacious wants to be, but better, because it can actually loiter over the target because it has so much HP that can make repeated damage over the time strikes. Again, we're also, again, top tier in 8 to 10 matchmaking, so a lot of targets. There's a Kid, but the Kid has worse AA than the Holland, and is more or less the same ship, but it has smoke. So really, nothing to challenge. I really just have to race against the FDR here, in this case. He also has the option of going for a carrier snipe against me, which is annoying, but there's really nothing you can do about that, and it doesn't typically happen. The Audacious, unlike the other tier 10 carriers, has a different armor scheme for its armored deck. Only the central strip is thick. The outer strakes and extremities are still fairly thin, which means high explosive munitions do have a fairly good time attacking. But anyhow, generally as a carrier, in this game you can see, as I said, no particularly difficult destroyers, so no need to pre-drop the rockets, but I'm going to take a look. Now the destroyer spawns should be mirrored, so I'm going to check the central spawn first. I'm going to be moving towards the center anyhow. Didn't get to make use of my legendary module too much there last game. I did use it to push myself into the cap, but that aside, not too much. Haven't screened off the corner where the Des Moines spawned yet, just looking for targets. The Richelieu has only 32mm of armor, so it should be a particularly tasty target. Was unable to find the central spawn DD in my first sweep. That Des Moines should hopefully have passed behind that island, but the Stalingrad's 6-kilometer long-range AA still may interfere. Okay, it's a Kitakaze. We fly right over him. And more than damaging him, since this first pass doesn't tend to deal that much damage. The important thing is that we were able to give away his position. Now, if I were a Benson, I don't know if I would pick a fight with a Kitakaze, but, you know, he does have me. But that's not necessarily going to be enough. Have to pop my engine cooling consumable here, by the way, in order to make sure I get the hit, but you can see even with the high density of rockets of 12 per plane, not necessarily enough to guarantee hits. Really just a light scraping. 4,800, nothing to laugh at, but that's a damage number you can easily achieve inside of just one strike. My Worcester does radar for my Benson, and we are going to continue to light him. This guy's stubbornly refusing to smoke for some reason. Although in this case, because he got radared, he would have not been able to use it. Okay, the kit gets dispatched, so we're very close to dispatching both destroyers here. Gonna fly through this flak. Pop my heel a bit late. Just gonna ride this out, see where he goes. Now the converging torps do force destroyers to stay fairly straight if they don't outturn them. Or in this case, if you have kind of poor rudder shift, well, something like that might happen to you. And he's gonna give me my first flooding ribbon for my Andrew Cunningham as well. Since this Massachusetts is accessible, we are gonna go in now. For the tier 8s, Indomitable and Implacable, they actually do have some trouble against the Massachusetts because 1, it's a fairly thorny ship, and 2, it has a 38mm American middle deck, but because the Audacious has 41mm of penetration, it has superior ability to attack them. 1 incapacitation, 2 floods, and there's my lightning fast popping off at the end, which pushes my planes now to 200 knots, which means I can chase. He's in a fairly exposed position, and pretty much my ideal target in the direct center. I'll push a little closer while I fish for my fires. Since he's alone with a full squadron, I should be able to get 2 attacks, and hopefully, even though the Massachusetts is a relatively compressed target, a fairly small ship by all accounts, I should be able to get some good hits off. His air detectability is surprisingly good. Maybe it was just the terrain blocking me from seeing him. With an American damage control, hopefully we can get some fairly good hits. Not going to go for a perfect hit here on the first pass. Don't really want to fight for that too much. Okay, we got a triple fire on our first pass, so that is going to sting for sure. We could leave him, but honestly, I'm just gonna finish up and try for a strike with more damage, really. Oh, he doesn't have fire prevention. We might still be able to score 1 more fire, and there is a quadruple fired Massachusetts. You can see that Richelieu threatening that cap. My team is pushing in, so I'm gonna advance with them, with that legendary module. Not necessarily keeping me safe, but, you know, keeping me from harm. I was gonna actually contest that Richelieu, but I think I actually should let them potentially take it. Okay, so the fire's stopped ticking, so that's a Massachusetts damage control. It's gonna take me more than 20 seconds to get there, so at this point, I'm gonna go finish the job. Make this guy a little miserable, but I actually kind of want, in terms of for random battles, I kind of want this game to extend, so I'm not going to help that Benson too much. Drop a fighter here. If the FDR wants to fly through it, he can. My heel is just now coming up, so actually just perfect timing to cycle through. You can see in the ideal circumstances, the Audacious can be extremely proficient at hunting its prey, but this is obviously some very good RNG coupled with some very sloppy enemy destroyers. The broken engine with no damage control means he's dead in the water, so I'm going to take my time with this one. Again, like the FDR, I can allow my drop to narrow and then bring it in. $19,000 health. I do actually need a flood still to finish him off. Even with... Okay, someone scores a fire. That's probably lethal. But I was going to say, even with the torpedo strikes, it's not going to be enough alpha damage. Benson does drop. And I think the Massachusetts probably popped a heal, which is why he's not dead to that fire. Oh, okay. No, the fire did eventually take him out. Now versus a more heavily armored target like the Stalingrad, the Midway or the FDR would have no trouble penetrating this armor. Looks like Des Moines Def AA based on where the flak buffs are coming from. But because I only have 41 mils of pen, and he has 50 mil armor strikes, I'm gonna get some significant amounts of shatters. Now the rockets, haven't really talked about them too much, but only 28 millimeters of penetration. The fire chance of 11% is, however, respectable. The Des Moines Def A may be still going. He took a nice AP salvo from the repub there from the looks of it. Nope, the Def A is over. He either cycled it or something otherwise. Let's see if we can rake that superstructure. Not quite enough. You can see him shattering some amount of my rockets. Gonna arm a strike just in case. My Minotaur fails to secure, and there we go. I do have to be careful staying here. And now that enemy team is balled up, but we did get a fire on the Stalingrad, so there is an opportunity to score some dot damage here, but you can see the vast majority of my damage thus far in this match has come from that Massachusetts. With the lightning fast proc, even the torpedo bombers move at a fairly fast clip, so this is the one advantage the Audacious has over some of its compatriots, at least for random battles and ranked battles where captain skills can activate. Very easy to land hits onto a rather static target like the Stalingrad. He's not able to turn very well here because of my ally's position. And with the converging torpedoes, it's fairly easy for me to land strikes, which result in kills. Petropavlovsk with Palmern with Richelieu. And there's a Palmern above me, but I don't really want to chase. I have plenty of planes to throw away, but I don't anticipate that I'm going to be able to make multiple strikes. Should try and finish targets where possible though. There's a fighter over that Richelieu. He's burning. Probably unnecessary. I'm going to do a rotation, and if he's still alive then I'll go in for him. Okay, so he died. So we can expend our aircraft on this Petropavlovsk. Note that there's a fighter here, but with my relatively fast airspeed, I should still be able to make the one attack, and now the one aircraft is just extraneous anyway, so don't really care. We got a fire, which is the important part. Because now we can go back at 200 knots with these Audacious level bombers. Petropavlovsk again, 50mm middle deck, it's just like that Stalingrad, so not the most ideal target. This guy is Def A running. Need him a half ship's length. You can see he's a fairly large cruiser, but even so the reticle dwarfs him. Circling around. You can see the constant in AA for the Petropavlovsk is not too impressive. It's the flak really that's a killer for that particular ship. Score some more fires, but my team is gonna make him drop. And at 900 points, well, this game is a foregone conclusion. Some pretty favorable matchmaking for 2 games in a row, I have to say. As well, this enemy team didn't exactly make things difficult, given that they kind of thrust both their destroyers into the caps very early, but do note that my 2 destroyers are dead as well, so this game is, even though it's going well for us because we established the lead slightly earlier, that doesn't mean that your own destroyers are going to do anything to make things easy. This game should have been a one-sided romp, but with our own destroyers dying shortly after, there's never any guarantee of things going smoothly. That's kind of just the way things are with how players behave. Destroyer players are notoriously unreliable. That Yamato should die, I believe, when my torpedoes connect. And that should end the game right there. So just because a game looks good, don't be fooled. It's a bit of a false premise. Only 141 this time, a bit of a shorter match. A little more torpedo hits, less bomb hits this time. You'll note, but 3 kills, 7 fires, 4 floods. That Massachusetts definitely had a good time, as we're about to see when I check out the detailed report. This time in a slightly faster game, I contributed more, but still a lot of my ship damage was battleship damage, so again, you can see that Burgoyne outperforming me. Detailed report-wise, 27,000 on that Stalingrad, mostly torpedoes, in this case 18,000 on the Yamato at the end, but 75,000 on the Massachusetts, of which just about half coming from the fires that he let tick after getting permanently set aflame in every section of his ship. And you can see the damage differential does differ. Torpedoes providing a vast majority along with fire damage this time, just because I bombed some more heavily armored targets such as the Stalingrad and Massachusetts. So when the bombs work, they do provide the bulk of your damage, but your torpedoes are that steady, safe source of damage, which is why I say that investing into them is a pretty good bet as well. Anyhow, 2 quick games on the Audacious. They looked pretty clean, but don't be fooled. When the enemy gives you a hard time, you're definitely not going to have victories that come as readily as these ones. Overall, in spite of her power, she still is a tier 10 carrier, so she still has that significant amount of power, but compared to her peers, she does still fall behind, mainly just because her rockets and bombs are just a little bit lackluster. They certainly drop a lot of munitions, but they lack the penetration power to kind of be as nearly as flexible as some of the other options at tier 10, so all in all, I unfortunately cannot recommend Audacious as a carrier to necessarily grind for if you're looking for a carry ship. Still fun though, especially with the legendary module allowing you to operate quite forward. So, no recommendation for power level, but a recommendation for fun, I suppose, is what you're going to have to settle with. Anyhow, that was the Audacious for today. My throat is quite parched. You can't even begin to imagine how many tries this kind of stuff takes sometimes with the player base tossing games, but it is what it is, right? Even that second game we played there, I almost considered not playing in case the game ended up being a complete romp and there was nothing to talk about. But yeah, it's just how things are sometimes. Anyhow, enough of that. I hope you enjoyed these Audacious games on patch 0.10.1, and I will catch you all later. Cheers.